couldn't fit it in my pocket. Flexing everything, baby, tell me big poppin'. Money in the bank coming, dropping a deposit. Having it my way, so I got these bitches watching. Steady getting to it, couldn't fit it in my pocket. Flexing everything, baby, tell me what the topic.
What's poppin', everybody? It's your favorite goss and doc tender, that girl Henny, and I am here to give you your hot shot of goss and court docs right now. I know that you guys are probably like, Henny, where the hell have you been? And Henny has been over on her other channel, the Press Box. So if you guys are not following that channel, please be sure that you go and you look up the Press Box. It is in the links in this channel's bio. I did also do a community post telling you guys to come on over to the Press Box, because over there we have Media Showdown, and Media Showdown is popping for real. It is a panel. We discuss celebrity gossip over there. It caters more to the Krishan and Blueface sector. However, we are beginning to spread out a little bit more. Yesterday, we did a show. We talked about Remy Ma, Papoose, and Clarissa Shields. And we also talked a little bit about Cardi B and some of the scandal around her. So we are expanding out into more of a celebrity gossip panel over there, still catering to the Krishan and Blueface sector. So head on over there, make sure that you guys subscribe and turn on your notification bells, because we go up, and Media Showdown for right now is on Mondays and Fridays. Right now, you are tuned into Spike Coffee in the Morning with that girl Henny, and we are here on Tuesdays and Thursdays. That has always been our schedule, and we're going to continue to keep that going. Now, if you are not a member over here, make sure that you join, because we are going back to doing our Wicked Wednesdays, where we talk about things that are of the spiritual nature. We've talked about the Annabelle doll. We've talked about people using witchcraft to unalive people and things of that nature. So we get over there on our spiritual girly stuff and have those conversations. We are also bringing back scandalous story time, plus much, much more to the members. There are 2 tiers. So make sure that you are joining the memberships. If you are members, you do have new stickers. So shout out to the new stickers. And I'm also working on adjusting those. So there are perks that are going to be coming along with being a member. Now, one more announcement. If you are not following me on Twitch, please be sure that you are following me on Twitch, as these broadcasts will not be full broadcasts over here all of the time. Sometimes we will end the broadcast over here on Facebook, on YouTube, wherever we are streaming at, and be exclusively on Twitch. So make sure that you guys are subscribed to the Twitch channel as well. And as always, don't forget to hit that like button, share the video out, throw your Henny glasses in the chat, because Spike Coffee and that girl Henny is back. Now, as you can tell from the thumbnail today, we are going to be getting into Diddy. Ciao. Let's talk about it for a second. Yes, I had to sip coffee for a second, because the diddler, his team, has been talking all of this time. Now, his trial came to a conclusion on July 2nd of this year. And as y'all know, I was up there covering it for the 2 months that it was running. And so when the trial came to an end, the judge gave everybody some orders on what he needed and what he wanted. Well, we heard more from the defense than we did the government this whole 2 months that we have been waiting on things to come back in and hearing arguments. Now the government has come back with what their recommendations are, and the government is asking for 135 months. Shout out to Uda on Go. Shout out to That's What I Said. Salute to everybody that's coming into the chat. Throw them Henny glasses, because y'all know where y'all are at. Now, me, personally, even though y'all know I have had my stance that I did not agree with a lot of the things that Diddy was doing, I feel like 135 months, which turns out to be 11 years and a quarter, I feel like that is overkill. I feel like they're doing too much now. You're doing too much. I said he would probably get like 3 or 5 years, but that is what they're requesting. That doesn't mean that that's what he's getting. And if you aren't keeping up with it, because I know I have not been over here on my Diddy stuff, I have not been over here on this channel, because I was pissed off with YouTube because they played with me. They robbed a lot of content creators down there at that Diddy trial, telling us, go vertical live, go vertical live. We go vertical live, and they robbed us. But anyway, that's another story for another day. Anyway, y'all know that I have my stance on it, but I do feel like this is overkill. However, for the first time ever, we're really getting the government's argument into what it is that they are saying and why they feel like this is what they are supposed to be asking for. I do have the court docs. We are going to get it popping right now. Let me get these docs up. Let me get my screen together to the one that I like. Well, I don't really have one that I like over here too tough. I'm not even going to hold you. I don't. All right, so we're going to use this one, and then we are going to come on and we are going to share. Now, this is going to be a long read, so y'all get in here, get comfortable. Okay, y'all might as well go ahead and get comfortable. And let's share this screen. All right, here we go. Let me come back over here to the restream, see how we're looking. I do not like this. I don't like this. I really don't. I'm trying to get to know Restream, but Restream is not impressing me at this moment. I like some of their stuff, but I don't like all of their stuff. See, like I don't like that. All right, let's see if I can adjust this one because it looks like this is as good as it's gonna get. Let me switch with that. All right. Can I resize that? No. All right, you guys, I don't know if y'all will be able to see that. So let me see. Can I zoom in and make that bigger? If I make it bigger, y'all can't see it. I don't like this. All right, either way, let's get into it. If I got to be off the screen, then I'm off the screen. Like I'm not going to let them hold me. Okay, I'll be little at the bottom. I don't want y'all all in my face. Why y'all all in my grill? We could do that one. Let me see something. We could do this one. That's fine. Can I make this bigger? Let me see. No. All right, we're done. This is where it's at. I'm done trying to adjust it. So y'all can see that. Y'all can see me. Let me get my glasses on and let's get to reading a little bit. I do have what the government is asking for, and I also have some victim impact statements as well. There were impact statements that were written by Cassie, Mia, Capricorn Clark, Deontay Nash, as well as Chef Jordan. Now, for me personally, if you've been over here, then you know how I feel about Chef Jordan. I feel like, girl, just hush because you didn't even bother to show up. You were so scared that you couldn't show up to the trial and give your testimony, even though you were part of the opening statements and you were supposed to be there. I feel the same way about Chef Jordan as I do about Gina. Y'all didn't come to court, so y'all voices should not matter at this particular point in time in the junction. And I know some people will probably be like, well, Henny, that's not fair because that takes away from their experience. My thing is, part of the healing process you are going through something like that is facing your accuser. Not only that, people not showing up and not giving their accounts of things, it hurt the government's case. I'm just going to say it. It hurt it. The fact that Gina did not show up to court and testify, and she was subpoenaed, and there's been no legal ramifications behind her directly ignoring a court order, it doesn't look good, okay? It doesn't look good. You were out here on Tasha K talking all of your junk that you was talking, and then you decided, sorry, y'all know. All right. So I'm not feeling it. What say y'all? What say you in the comment sections? Do you feel like their words, their testimony should hold weight? And I feel like, what are you waiting for? Why is Gina not facing, and I'm sorry, people may not like when I say this, but why is Gina not facing consequences? Can you guys hear me good? There should be consequences for not coming to court. If the everyday average Joe is subpoenaed and doesn't show up, there's a consequence. Chef Jordan, you were subpoenaed, you didn't show up, there's consequences for that. So why are we not seeing it? Anyway, let's continue. So this is the government sentencing memorandum. All right, there is the table of content. This is an 164-page document, you guys. How's the voice to music ratio? Is it good, or is the music overpowering me? Let me know before I start reading. Shout out to everybody. Shout out to all of the snipers that are in the building. What YouTube channel are we on? My volume is good. Okay, thank you. I want to make sure that the ratio is good. Shout out and salute to everybody. As you can see, your comments are here on the screen. So we see everybody. Shout out to everybody. All right. So it starts off throughout this case and over the course of a 7-week trial. This court has seen extensive evidence demonstrating the defendant's criminal conduct perpetrated across more than a decade. At trial, the defendant disputed that the government had made out particular elements of the charged federal offenses, but he largely conceded his conduct: the violence, domestic abuse, drug use, and distribution and bribery. The defendant will not be punished for any crimes of which he was acquitted, of course, but punishment for his crimes of conviction must take into account the manner in which he committed them. His crimes of conviction are serious and have warranted sentences over 10 years in multiple cases for defendants who, like Sean Combs, engaged in violence and put others in fear. Consistent with those cases and based on the corroborative evidence presented at trial, this court should impose a sentence of no less than 135 months imprisonment. A substantial term of imprisonment is also needed in this case because the defendant is unrepented, meaning he's not sorry for what he's done. Child, let me sip this coffee. Okay, the real Phoenix Jones said Diddy getting 20 long years. Well, the government isn't asking for 20 years right now. The government is asking for 135 years. 135 months, which turns out to be 11 years and a quarter. Okay. Now let's get back to what we were reading. They're bringing up the fact that he's unrepented. He has no remorse. That right there is playing a part. And I told you guys that the government was probably going to bring this up. They were probably going to bring this up, but shit, 11 years? All right. Incredibly, while the defendant conceded his acts of violence and abuse throughout the trial, he now argues that his victims should shoulder the blame. The defendant tries to recast decades of abuse as simply the function of mutually toxic relationship. But there is nothing mutual about a relationship where one person holds all the power and the other ends up bloodied and bruised. God damn, did y'all have to go there? But I told y'all they were going to bring up, if y'all remember, I told you guys, when the judge said the preponderance of violence, that is what the government and the judge are looking at. They're looking at the history of everything that they heard at trial. And you got to also remember, there's things that happened in the grand jury trial that we don't know about. There's things that they heard that we didn't hear because those people never came to trial. But still, let's continue because we're trying to figure out why the government is saying so many years. Indeed, in connection with sentencing, Cassandra Ventura, who, along with multiple escorts, was transported across state lines by the defendant for a multi-day freak-offs in connection with count 3, of which the defendant was convicted, writes to the court that freak-offs are degrading and disgusting, leaving her with infections, illness, and exhaustion. Ventura became addicted to the drugs the defendant provided her. She still has nightmares about the defendant's conceded physical abuse, which lasted more than a decade and left her with permanent scars all over her body. The defendant's abuse drove Ventura to self-backspacing thoughts, which she almost followed through on, as she testified at trial. Now, she did testify to this and say that there was a point in time when she was considering backspacing herself and that she was going to walk in front of a truck and just end it all. Is the music still good, you guys? I get nervous with the music when I don't know things, and Restream is new to me, so I don't know. Okay, the court heard testimony and reviewed contemporaneous communications from Jane, who, along with escorts, was transported across state lines by the defendant for hotel nights in connection with count 5, of which the defendant was also convicted. Jane's testimony and communications detail how she was manipulated and beaten by the defendant. That evidence included a note Jane wrote to herself about how she felt violated and was tormented by how the defendant had placed and paid all of these harmful men on me and risked my health every single night for 2.5 years. Now, I'm going to say this. I get it. I get what's being said to me in this writing. I get it. But what I'm also going to say is I had a hard time with Jane at trial. I'm not going to lie to you. I had a hard time with Jane at trial. I just did. Oh my God. Trilla. Oh my God. I love you so much. Trilla, call me. Okay. Just call me. I can't even right now. Call me, girl. All right. I had a hard time with Jane at trial. I did. There was evidence of things, but then she was there for vengeance, and you could tell she was there for vengeance. You could tell that she was still very much in love with Diddy. I don't even know. She doesn't even have a victim impact statement that was submitted that we know of. So I don't know. But anyway, let's continue. My judgment is not here. We're not even supposed to be going over that. We're supposed to be figuring out why the government feels he needs 11 years. All right. So defendants who perpetrate violations of the Mann Act, such violence and fear regularly face significant penalties. So what they're saying is there's other defendants who have faced violations of the Mann Act and they've gotten such sentences. All right. The defendant should be no exception, particularly when his history and characteristics demonstrate years of abuse and violence. Several former employees abused and exploited by the defendant, including one whom the defendant sexually assaulted, submitted letters to the court in connection with sentencing. These letters uniformly ask that the court impose a sentence that reflects the severity of the defendant's conduct and his history and pattern of violence. Now, this is where it comes in at when I said to you guys, that's what they're going to bring into this. Okay. People were talking about it's domestic violence. It's this, it's violence. It's a history of violence. And no one hears Henny when Henny speaks about that. All they want me to do is scream free Diddy. What I'm going to say is this is overkill on Diddy in my eyes. Okay. In my eyes. But I'm telling you, this is where it's coming from. All right. Given the seriousness and the duration of the offense conduct, as well as his decades of unchecked violence, consideration of the relevant factors under U.S. Code 18 weighs heavily in favor of a substantial sentence, as well as the statutory maximum fine. So put a pin in that. Not only are they asking for this 11 years and a quarter, they're also asking for him to pay the maximum amount of a fine. Child. Let's sip our coffee, shall we? They said because he's so violent and his history has gone unchecked, he's never suffered any consequences of any actions. We got him now. We gonna get him now. Child, look at here. The sentence imposed on the defendant should reflect the substantial psychological, emotional, and physical damages he has inflicted. Most significantly, the nature and seriousness of the offense, the need for deterrence, and to promote respect for the law, and the history and characteristics of the defendant warrant a sentence of no less than 135 months imprisonment. So they're saying, listen, look at the history, look at the characteristics that have been displayed, look at how long this has gone on. That's what they're going for. That's what they are going for. The history of it all, how long it, his character, the way that his character was displayed in the trial. Child, while they're not taking him to this sentencing for the charges that he did do, they're not charging him or using what he wasn't charged with, is what I'm trying to say, to convict him. But they are not overlooking the details of the case in its entirety. And the way that the government is building this, for those who feel like that has nothing to do with it, it does. It absolutely does, because there was violence that occurred in intimidation tactics, according to the government, that warrant that tie into this. Everything ties into each other. So there's no way that they're separating one from the other. This is what the government is saying. Don't come for me. I'm just telling y'all. People don't want to hear my side of the story. How I'm telling y'all what the government doing. I told y'all what the government was going to come back and say, and I ain't missed yet. Anyway, such a sentence is consistent with similarly situated defendants who commit Mann Act violations and is warranted here. So again, they're saying there are people who have done the same exact thing and they've got a substantial sentence. The only people that I could think of that come to mind when it comes down to the Mann Act is like R. Kelly is the first one, of course, that comes to mind. The Nexum is another one that comes to mind. But they also had other charges on top of them and they were convicted of their RICOs. So I don't know. Let me see. Cynthia Ramos said the chef was scared. She didn't want a bag. Gina, she probably got a bag. Gina probably got a bag, and not for nothing. Maybe if you/we was in the chef's shoes, we would know how it feels. The chef ain't want nothing. The point of the matter of what I was saying, Cynthia, before you get on your soapbox and make it seem like I'm coming at her for no reason. With Cassie and Jane being the only two that gave testimony, there was a gap. And the chef was supposed to be as much of a witness as Gina, as Cassie, and as Jane. She was one of their star witnesses. And when she dropped out, she left a hole in the government's case. And that harmed the government's case because the government's job was to show a consistent 10-year pattern. The government's job was to show us that this has been something that has gone on throughout the years. The violence has gone on throughout the years with his employees, year after year after year. And that it wasn't just specific employees, that it was multiple employees. So while she may have felt like she was scared, if you wanted him to go down, then you should have showed up to court. Nothing has happened to anyone. And I get being scared. Trust me, I get being scared. But this was about you getting justice. This was about getting justice. And now, because you didn't show up to court, you're still using your voice, which is good, but you did not use your voice to get justice, not just for you, but for everybody who took that stand. That's where I'm coming from. I'm not degrading, belittling, berating, or saying that her experience is minute. What I'm saying is the unified front for everyone to seek the justice that they were seeking depended on her piece of the puzzle. And when she decided to drop out, her piece of the puzzle was missing. That gave the defendant wiggle room because between Cassie's relationship all the way to Jane, they're saying there's no violence. Well, there's no story there. When it comes to employees, there's barely anything after Cassie to Jane. But during the grand jury, there was testimony that bridged the gap. So she dropped the ball on carrying her weight. That's what I'm calling out. I am in no way trying to humiliate this woman. But I'm saying now you have your voice again. But you let everybody down. Because we wouldn't be sitting here having any of these discussions had everyone shown up. And I'm also saying she was subpoenaed. There was no consequence. Gina was subpoenaed. There was no consequence. If you or I, regardless to the stature of our victimhood, if we were subpoenaed and did not show up to court, we would have been heard from the government by now. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. Now, you don't have to agree, but I just wanted to make sure that it's not being misconstrued, that I'm not victim shaming here. I'm actually saying you let your fellow people down when you didn't show up to court. Now, let's get into the procedural background. It says the federal investigation and charges. So the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York and Homeland Security Investigations began investigating the defendant in connection with his physical and sexual abuse of intimate partners, among other acts of violence, on November 17th of 2023. In September 2024, a grand jury sitting in the Southern District of New York indicted the defendant. And on September 16th, 2024, the defendant was arrested in New York City and taken into federal custody. Since his arrest, the defendant has been housed in the in the MDC in Brooklyn. We know that. Okay. On or about April 3rd of 2025, a grand jury sitting in the Southern District of New York voted a 5-count superseding indictment, charging the defendant with the following: racketeering conspiracy, SMEX trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion related to Ventura. So we know what all of the charges are, and that's what the history was. Okay, so then they go down to the pre-trial bail hearings. All right, hearings. The defendant was arraigned on September 17th of 2024. And after extended argument, Judge Tarnowski, because that's the first judge that was on this case, detained the defendant. And then the judge noted that the defendant's crimes happened behind closed doors, which makes it impossible to monitor. The court further found that the detention was warranted based on the defendant's history and characteristics, observing that given the allegations of violence and substance abuse, I don't know that I think you can trust yourself. Okay. The defendant appealed the judge's decision to Judge Carter, to whom the case was then assigned, and a bail hearing before Judge Carter proceeded on September 18th. After lengthy arguments, Judge Carter denied the defendant's bail, finding that the defendant was a danger regarding obstruction of justice and witness tampering, and that the defendant posed a danger to the safety of others in the community. So now let's take a look at that for a second before we go any further. It was not one, not two, but now there's been three, because Judge Subpoena has also said this happened behind closed doors. We have no way of monitoring anything. So no, we're not letting him out. So he was denied bail by 3 different judges. Now, I know there's some people that were feeling like it was all one judge. It was not one judge. It was not 2 judges. It was 3 judges thus far that we've heard of. And as far as the witness tampering, if you are confused about that, if you remember when Dawn dropped her lawsuit, Dawn Richard is also somebody who came and testified. He reached out to Kalina and was blowing Kalina's phone up because Kalina could corroborate Dawn's story to get Dawn to go out, allegedly. This is according to the government. I didn't say it. They said it. I heard it. I'm repeating it. To get Kalina to say that she knew nothing about what he was talking about. Okay. That's what they're alleging. Now, it says on November 8th of 2024, after this court was assigned the case, the defendant filed a renewed motion for bail in connection with the opposition to the motion. The government cited exceptions from certain excerpts from certain of the defendant's notes that had been photographed during a sweep of MDC in October of 2024. During a hearing on November 19th of 2024, addressing the defendant's allegations that the government was in possession of attorney-client privilege material, the defendant caused his attorney to present the court with a notebook marked legal, to erroneously suggest that the government had knowingly obtained notes from the defendant that had clearly been marked legal. I agree. Karma is a bitch. Okay. By order dated November 27, 2024, the court denied the defendant's renewed motion for bail, citing the defendant's propensity for violence, the serious risk of witness tampering, and the open question as to whether the defendant could abide by conditioning, giving the flagrant violation of BOP rules, the misrepresentation made at November 19th hearing. Now, they're showing you what I'm going to tell you right now. With all of that they've brought up, that's, to me, what I'm getting from that is that it is backing up their allegations that there is no remorse and that he has been relentless with trying to get out, which is true. Like, Diddy ain't trying to sit there. And if I'm being honest with you, I can't blame him for wanting to get out. None of us would want to be sitting in Click Click City. Let's be real. But from the minute he got in Click Click City, he has not sat. And he's been so focused on getting out that it looks like he's unremorseful. That's what I'm saying. They're saying. I'm not saying it. It's an assumption on what they're saying and how they're seeing it. All right. And then they get into the 7 weeks of trial, and they talk about all of the testimony that went on. We know, the testimony of Jane Knights, including by delivering thousands of dollars to the defendant so he could pay commercialized sex workers. Well, let's read some of this, okay? Because there may be some stuff in here that people aren't talking about, which I told you has been happening. As described below, the trial evidence included: 1, the testimony of Ventura, who was in a relationship with the defendant for approximately 11 years, during which time she experienced brutal physical and psychological abuse at the hands of the defendant and engaged in freak-offs at times on a weekly basis. 2, the testimony of Jane, who was in a relationship with the defendant from approximately 2021 through the defendant's arrest, and engaged in frequent hotel nights with the defendant, and also experienced violence and manipulation at the hands of the defendant, including after the defendant knew that he was under investigation for sex trafficking. 3, the testimony of multiple other individuals who experienced violence at the hands of the defendant. 4, testimony of former employees who were responsible for setting up freak-offs and hotel nights, including by delivering thousands of dollars to the defendant so he could pay commercial sex workers, and procuring drugs at the defendant's behest. And 5, the testimony of an expert psychologist, Dr. Dawn Hughes, regarding victim responses to abuse. 6, text messages, emails, phone records, photos, videos, and audio recordings, among other records. And 7, physical evidence, including drugs and firearms recovered from the defendant's residence. On July 2nd of 2025, the jury convicted the defendant of counts 3 and 5, concluding that he had transported individuals, including Ventura, Jane, and commercial male sex workers in interstate and foreign commerce with the intent that they engage in prostitution. Remember, I kept telling y'all, everybody keeps talking about this, but you keep forgetting there is prostitution involved. The jury acquitted the defendant of counts 1, 2, and 4, the RICO conspiracy and sex trafficking counts. A summary of the trial evidence is below, okay? The offset of conduct, the defendant's relationship with Cassie, the violence, okay? They break down the violence. Henny Glasses in the chat if y'all want me to read all of this. I mean, they included, okay, remember this photo I showed y'all? They included the photograph here. There's a photograph of Cassie. This is the gash over her forehead, okay? What else do they have in here? This is Cassie with a black eye covering it up, okay? Of course, the Intercontinental video. This is Cassie with a busted lip. She also had a black eye after that incident happened. Let's see what else they're going to show us in here. Do you have any more? Are you going to show Jane? They're talking about all this is a summary of all of the testimony, you guys. Yeah, y'all see it's a lot. I told y'all it's a 164-page document, okay? Plus we have the victim impact statements. I'm trying to find the photos and things of that nature that they may have included, because we saw way more than just those four. We saw a lot of stuff, you guys. Sheesh, we're on page 94 and they didn't include any photographs of anything else. Okay? I'm just trying to make sure. But they're basically breaking down the case and all of that. But we're going to go all the way to find their conclusion. Maybe I'll sit and do this for a specific podcast. Just sit and read all of it. They have a lot of redactions. Okay. Okay. So let's get into it. The defendant's personal circumstances do not warrant a lenient sentence. All right. Let's see. Oh, hold on, because we need some of this. Hold on. Don't blame me, because this music is what Restream has, okay? I haven't uploaded any of my music files. So I got to find one, because this is where they are giving up their reasoning for him not getting leniency. We ain't doing all that. Oh, we have to. Okay. The defendant's arguments for a lenient sentence are unpersuasive. Okay. So this is where they're actually going. Let's stay with the charges. There is no charge for abuse for Cassie. It's not even about, see, you're still not, it's not clicking. It's not about abuse. There's physical violence. It's violence. It's violence. It's violence. It's a history of violence. It's a propensity for violence. Okay, I'm about to turn this music off because I don't like it. It's a propensity for violence. And stop trying to downplay somebody's experience, please and thank you. We don't do that over here. Acting like it's okay. It's not okay. I don't like their music. We ain't using their music, so let's just keep it moving. All right, so they're saying that his arguments for leniency, they're unpersuasive. So the conditions of the MDC do not warrant a lenient sentence. The defendant argues that the conditions at the MDC during his incarceration have made his sentence substantially more punitive. Punitive. Okay. But as detailed below, there is no indication that the defendant personally experienced most of the conditions about which he complains. And even if he had, it is now well known the conditions at the MDC have continuously and significantly improved since the defendant's incarceration there. Ultimately, MDC conditions do not warrant a lenient sentence. Now, I'm going to say this. While the conditions at the MDC, oh my God, they're known to be deplorable. Okay. It's been a lot about things that have gone on there, and nobody should be housed there. And I'm going to say this, if he gets a lenient sentence because he is there at the MDC, then everybody who is housed at the MDC should get a lenient sentence. Every prisoner that is incarcerated there should get a lenient sentence. Okay. That's my 1-2 on it. Okay. As he did in his motion for bail following his conviction, the defendant cites the Chavez and Colucci for the proposition that a reduced sentence is warranted due to conditions at the MDC. However, as discussed in the government's prior following, conditions at the MDC have improved dramatically since those cases were decided more than a year ago. Indeed, courts in this district have begun to consistently note these improvements, which occurred throughout the period in which the defendant has been incarcerated. Okay. So they're saying there's no way. Further, as the government noted in its prior submission, the defendant first raised complaints about the conditions at the MDC after he was convicted at trial. This stands in stark contrast to defense counsel's repeated praise for the MDC and its treatment of the defendant in the months leading up to trial, which they make a valid point because it was said in the trial that, hey, you know, they've been very cooperative there, and they had nothing to say about any of these conditions during the trial, before the trial. And you got to remember, since September of 2024, Diddy was housed there, and there was not one complaint prior to his conviction about any of the circumstances and the conditions that he was living in at the MDC. That came after his conviction. Now where were we? This stands to stark, repeated praise of the treatment. The MDC has been very accommodating to us in many ways. That's what they said. Then they also went on to say, I want to thank the MDC. The MDC gave us good access to him. By failing to alert the government in real time to any of the issues now included in his sentencing submission, defense counsel has deprived the government, as well as MDC staff and the court, of any opportunity to investigate and remediate whatever alleged conditions may have existed, if any. These unsubstantiated claims now should not now, at the very last stage of the case in the district court, form a basis for a lenient sentence. So again, what they're saying is Look, being that this was never mentioned before, you deprived us of the right to be able to go in there and actually correct anything that was going on. You didn't give us a chance to investigate anything. You're just dropping this in our lap and saying, hey, he should get less time because of all of these reasons. Well, now we're going to hear all of the reasons that he's saying have going on. Okay. So it says, in addition, the arguments set forth by the defense regarding the conditions at the MDC are highly misleading or outright inaccurate as detailed below. So it says, contrary to the defendant's claims, lockdowns are no longer common at the MDC. As the defendant himself acknowledges, he is currently housed in a dorm style unit, and there are therefore no cells in which inmates could be locked. A lockdown in such a setting simply restricts inmates' movements past certain, they can't go certain places. Salute to active Chucks in this cipher. Regardless, the BOP has confirmed that there have not been any lockdowns in the defendant's unit during his incarceration. So they're saying, look, you talking about lockdowns, but you're not even in a housing unit where a lockdown really affects you, because it's a dorm style lockdown, which means that there's multiple beds in there. Like, there's no individual cells. It's just a multiple bed housing. So you aren't being locked down. And even if you were being locked down, you're restricted. Well, I don't think it's multiple beds. I think it's still, he's not restricted as when they have cells. Okay. Now, normally when you have a lockdown situation in a prison, while I've never been there, I told y'all I have dealt with prison my whole life. Okay. Since a baby, I've been going up there to go do the visiting room. I know how to work the dance floor, honey. So what happens is you're in your cell and your cell is locked and you can't go out your cell at all. You have no movement except for in your cell. In a dorm styled setting, you can move around just that cell, but you can't leave. You're restricted in where you can go and what you can do. You don't have as much freedoms, but you're not actually cut off as heavy as you are when you're in a cell. I think I explained that correctly. I'm not sure, but that's the difference. So you're not really in isolation, right? Okay. So similarly, the defendant's claims that he has no access to sunlight or fresh air are false. The BOP has confirmed that every day the defendant has access to a recreational space that is particularly exposed to allow sunlight and airflow at MDC, which also offers recreational and wellness activities. Did he say he don't get to go outside? Granted, MDC, I don't think they have like an outside open ball court or anything like that, but I know some of the prisons, they have a section of like a floor where it's the gym, and then some places just have a small area. I don't know what their actual recreation looks like, but they're like, look, he can go outside and get fresh air and get sunlight if he so chooses to. All right. The defendant claims that there are bugs in the food at MDC. Is similarly baseless. And it stems from an undated, unsourced, unexplained, and uncorroborated photograph published by the news media several months ago without giving the MDC or government any advance notice or opportunity to investigate. The BOP has since conducted a thorough investigation into food contamination, and none of these allegations have been corroborated. I call bullshit. And I'm going to tell you why I call bullshit. My baby daddy, my baby father, he was in the MDC. And he already told me about bugs in the food. So I call bullshit. My son, who is not in a BOP facility, but in an actual Florida State correctional facility, has told me that there have been bugs in their food. You don't eat the prison food. That's why commissary is very important. You don't eat the prison food. But to say that there's no bugs is a lie. That's a lie. Grant said he was in there before Diddy. I'm talking about, my kid's father. He was in the MDC before Diddy. It doesn't matter. There was still bugs in the food. He said a food cart came up and a water bug came out the cart. No, sir. I wouldn't eat that shit. Anyway, he need the pause. You want sunlight after all the shit you done, bruh. The defendant also claims that he has limited access to clean water, no access to functioning washing machines or dryers, and experiences extreme temperatures at the MDC. To contrary, the BOP has confirmed that the defendant's unit has a spout that provides hot and cold water and functioning washer dryer. In addition, the defendant unit has not received complaints about extreme temperatures. This summer, cooling units were replaced, so fans were provided to inmates during the process, which lasted under 2 weeks. First of all, I have heard about the first of all, I remember going up to the jails and they got the big metal fans in there that are supposed to be what cools you off. So some of this shit I can't say is exaggerated, because right now, as we speak, my son, I'm in communications with the warden, and 2 seconds from going to the health department and the inspector general, if they don't do something, because my son right now, as we speak, is sick from drinking the water there at the facility. So yeah, I can even attest to, and I'm not saying that this is going on at the BOP, but what I'm saying to you is these are not uncommon. And one of the facilities, the one that he was at before the one he was transferred to, we couldn't drink out of the water fountain. They had bottled waters for us to drink because the water was no good for us to drink. The COs were telling us that as visitors. So if you expect me to believe, and I've already heard this as well from other facilities that people I know have been in, you don't drink the water. So I can't say everything that he's saying is bullshit when I know for a fact that some of this shit is actually factual, okay? The defendant claims that he has been deprived of proper medical treatment. Another thing that I can say, I know for a fact, is something that does go on. So I can't sit up here and say that everything that he's saying is bullshit. I cannot. I cannot. Look, Actor Chuck said the drinking water in some jail facilities is brown. Exactly. So I can't say that all of this shit is bullshit. The only thing that I could say is if you're going to give him leniency for being in a facility with all of this going on, then everybody should get leniency for what's going on in the facilities. I don't know if he'll stay in New York, Dinella, because with the federal system, they can house you anywhere. Okay, you could be from New York and you could end up in Idaho or Wyoming or, Utah or something like that. My kid's father was in oh, the name just went right out my head. Something Mountain. Oh, the federal facility, something Mountain. I can't remember the name at this exact immediate moment, but it's one of the worst ones that they have. And I think it was in Virginia, DC, Virginia, somewhere around there. You know what I'm talking about, Dinella? Fuck. I've said it before. And now I'm like just drawing a freaking blank. I'm trying to see. I have it written down somewhere. Cardi B talked about it. Shit. No, he wasn't in Kentucky. He wasn't in Kentucky, but shit, and I can't call him right now. Hazleton. I said something Mountain because they call it something Mountain. He was in Hazleton. So, yeah, it was pretty bad. He was always on lockdown. He can also submit a request to go to a certain state when they do the sentencing judgment paperwork. Now, that's true, too, because his mom is 85 years old, so he can request to stay closer to New York State due to the fact that his mom is older. But again, you could end up anywhere. Another friend of mine that I know was doing Fed time, and he ended up in Chicago. Okay. So it's no telling. Now, one of the other things that they're saying is that the defendant's psychiatric evaluations are unreliable and do not warrant a lenient sentence. All right. They're saying that the defendant also argues for a lenient sentence based on claims that he has been rehabilitated and will continue to rehabilitate once released from custody. Now, this has been my argument. This has been my argument right here. And I want to see what the government has to say about this, because in all honesty, how are you rehabilitated in 2 months? You got to remember, the sentencing had the trial ended on July 2nd. So you got July, August, September. We're getting ready to go into October. Okay. Today is the 30th. October 1st is tomorrow. So you're going to tell me in 3 months you've been rehabilitated? Not buying it. So the government says, in support of his contention, the defendant submits 2 reports by Doctors Kruger and Kaplan, stating in substance that the defendant is blank. Okay. They won't say what it is, but it says the government can provide the defendant's MDC medical records to the court upon request, which entry is related to, and they've redacted that. Okay. And I could have swore that the judge said, don't redact nothing. Why y'all still redacting? Nothing should be redacted anymore. Well, if it's HIPAA, then they have to. Oh, yeah, they have to redact that because it says the defendant is blank. So that's probably a diagnosis. They have to redact it. They have to. Tay52 says, right, my son is in a MO prison and it's stuff that goes on that's not good for him and others at all. And it hurts because water shaking my damn head, much more. Exactly. The government also notes that while the defendant elsewhere in his submission contends that there are no other educational courses offered at MDC aside from his course, Free Game with Diddy, that too is false. Now, remember they said that he was speaking to the prisons and doing it. So you mean to tell me they done allowed Diddy to go into prison and start a course called Free Game with Diddy? So he's up in the jail teaching people free game. Listen, I'm gonna tell you this. He's a hell of a businessman. He's a hell of a mogul. You can't take that away from him as a person. Yeah. Business wise, he's 10 out of 10. But as a person, I'm just going to say it. Diddy sucks as a person from what we've heard in trial. Okay. Personal relationships, it sounds like he sucks. Unless you're, family or something like that. It just sounds like he sucks. Okay. But let's go on. The MDC offers a plethora of educational courses, including GED program and post-secondary courses through a partnership with Columbia University and adult continuing education classes. Although the defendant has not enrolled in any educational offerings during his time at the MDC, he completed the strategies for change, relationships and personal responsibility, quiet moments, and managing my emotion programs. But you said that there were no other educational programs in there. That doesn't look good. That doesn't look good because you're saying there's no other educational programs, but you completed programs there. I don't get it. It should be noted that Dr. Kruger states that a concern exists that the risk for domestic violence might not be captured by these instruments, absent victim outcry or by notification to police or by an arrest. So the doctor that he's seeing is saying that there is a concern. So even his doctor is lining up with what they're saying. A concern exists that the risk for domestic violence might not be captured by these instruments, absent victim outcry or by notifications to police or by arrest, meaning that even though he has taken those courses, a concern still exists that domestic violence, which is actually violence, can still happen and not be recorded unless the victim outcries or notifies the police or Diddy gets arrested. So this does not look good. Okay. And I know this ain't a domestic violence case. No, but they're talking about his history of violence. And domestic violence and violence, it's violence. It's just violence. Hello. Moreover, the defendant cites that the BOP's psychological records for the proposition that the defendant is a low risk for sexual abusiveness. However, as noted in the defendant's BOP records, that assessment is limited to his conduct while incarcerated, and notes that the defendant may engage in this type of behavior in the future. Whoa. Yeah, I just threw my glasses down. So, and this is in the notes. They're saying that one of the doctors not only said that there is still a concern and that the risk of him being violent is still there. They're also saying that his low risk of sexual abusiveness is limited to his conduct while incarcerated. And they're saying that he may engage in this type of behavior in the future. This is psychological evaluations. Now I get it. They're also, people will argue, oh, they're from the prison. But if you remember, Mark Agnifilo said that they had their own people coming in to evaluate him. That's what they're saying. I don't think he's getting time served, Sharon. I'm being honest. I don't. While it appears that the doctors were provided with Ventura and Jane's testimony, it does not appear that they were provided with any other testimony in the case, including testimony regarding incidents of violence and sexual abuse. Okay, hold on. Okay, so this is what we were reading. We read this right here that I read is in the notes. All of this right here, this is in the notes. This is noting what these doctors that he's talked to have said. So let's go back and read that top part again and then get back into what the government is saying, okay? The defendant also argues for leniency based on claims that he has been rehabilitated and will continue to rehabilitate once released from custody. In support of this contention, the defendant submitted 2 reports by Doctors Kruger and Kaplan stating in substance that the defendant is blank. These reports, however, are unreliable. While it appears that the doctors were provided with Ventura and Jane's testimony, it does not appear that they were provided with any other testimony in the case, including testimony regarding incidents of violence and sexual abuse involving other trial witnesses. Moreover, they were provided with only a couple dozen of pages of Ventura and the defendant's vast text communications. The excerpts provided to the doctors appear to be blatantly self-serving, such as a handful of sexually explicit conversations from Ventura to the defendant, cherry-picked out of thousands of pages of their communications. And the doctors do not appear to have been provided with any of the defendant's communications with Jane. This skewed sample of records calls into question the reliability and conclusion of these reports. Further, it is clear that the defendant, whose interviews form a central basis of these medical evaluation, is an untrustworthy narrator. Oh, that is a fancy way of calling somebody a liar. I gotta highlight that. I don't want it to be that. I want to change the color. Y'all know I like to have a different color. That is another way of calling a person a liar in a fancy way. You are an untrustworthy narrator, okay? In many interviews, Dr. Kruger, the defendant, in many interviews with Dr. Kruger, the defendant denied all wrongdoing for any of the charges with which he is ultimately convicted. He described his relationship with Ventura as involving mutual violence, noting And then it's redacted. Despite the clear evidence that he was the primary aggressor, the defendant also claimed to be blank and denied any other accusations of sexual harassment or of sexual crimes. Despite numerous pending civil lawsuits against him, many of which involve allegations of sexual misconduct. So the government is bringing in the fact that there are other sexual misconduct cases out there. Okay. And denied any other accusations of sexual. I read that part already. The defendant also claimed that he was interested in blank and blank. That figure simply cannot square with the testimony of Ventura and Jane, who testified that freak-offs or hotel nights often lasted several days and sometimes took place weekly, whether because of self-delusion or self-preservation. The defendant told a myriad of half-truths when speaking with these doctors, further undermining the conclusion of their evaluation. In light of this fact and the skewed record provided to the doctors, it is not surprising that the conclusions reached by both doctors echo the defendant's own narratives and are nearly inconsistent records. Now, I am a little confusion here because in the footnotes, they're saying that these doctors came to these conclusions about them being concerned. I want to know when they got those notes. Did you get these notes after talking with the doctors? Like, did the government come in and say something? Like, how did y'all get that? I hope they get into that in this explanation, because in the footnote, it's saying that Dr. Kruger says that there is a concern that violence will occur again, and that the other doctor is saying that the risk for sexual, debauchery basically is limited to him being inside of the MDC, and that they can't really say whether or not he'll do it again because he's in prison. So, but then they're saying that he's given skewed testimony, which is something that people can do. I mean, every day people go to therapy and they lie to the therapist and then they say therapy doesn't work. No, the therapist is giving you solutions and help and treatment plans for what you're telling them. And if you're not telling them the truth, then they're going to help you based off of what you're giving them, period. Sharon asked, with your experience, does jail time change personality and behavior? Well, it can. And that's when, have you ever heard the term, Sharon, of that person is institutionalized? Have you ever heard that? Because even we as a society are institutionalized. But in my experience, yes, if they are able to be broken down mentally, which can happen when people spend extended periods of time incarcerated, they become what's called institutionalized, and this changes their behavior. And the reason that their behaviors are changed is due to trauma, due to lifestyle change and extremities of being incarcerated. So yes, jail time does change personality and behaviors. Now, can a person also go into prison and come out a better person? Yes, but that doesn't happen in a 1, 2, 3 type of situation. Change doesn't occur as simply as people would like it to he's been incarcerated for 13 months, so he's done these programs, so he should be able to come home. Well, you got to think about this. The behaviors that he displayed, right, in the history of what we've heard happen, those are decades. I'm going to get to this comment in a second. Those are decades. That's a pattern of behavior that's happened over decades. You don't get that erased out of you 1, 2, 3. It doesn't. It doesn't just go away overnight. It took decades for you to actually get to those behaviors, right? And so it takes time for those behaviors to change, because it becomes a part of who you are. Now, as far as what Pop Top Game 47 said, shout out to people who are tuning in from Twitch. Yes, he did. Yes, he did. There is evidence of the violence. There's evidence of the drugs. There's evidence of this that was displayed at trial. So to say that he is innocent, I cannot say that. What I can say is the jail time does seem unfair given with what he was found guilty of. And if I'm going to be honest with you, I've said from the beginning that I felt like the government dropped the ball with the case that they put on, because they put all of their eggs in one basket when they had evidence for other things that would have been RICO chargeable. And if they really wanted to get a RICO, they could have if they would have gone after those things. He's not innocent. He's not innocent. Even some of the people that are down that were at the trial with me, they were saying he's not innocent, but free Diddy. No, Diddy has gotten away with a lot over the years. And I'm just being honest. I'm not even going to sit here and act like, I'm not biased. I'm truthful. I'm not biased. I'm truthful. I saw that video over and over again. It was overkill with the video. Okay. But we saw the video over and over again. Then we saw photographs of Cassie and the bruising and all of that. We heard her mother testify to the fact that she was blackmailed to not release Cassie's Smex videos. We heard from employees that talked about violence, witnessing violence against the girlfriends. Okay, and not saying anything because they didn't want to lose their jobs, or them suffering at the hands of him violence. They talked about him wiring money and them going to go get it, and them purchasing drugs for him and setting up freak off rooms and making money runs and CVS runs to stock up for these hotel nights. They showed us the firearms with the defaced serial numbers, and that should have been enough already. The video that I'm speaking of is the hotel video of him beating on Cassie. And we saw it from multiple different angles as well. And the phone was not his phone. That was Cassie's phone that he took. Cassie didn't steal any money. Cassie didn't steal any drugs. Cassie was leaving the hotel room, and there was a male escort in that hotel room. Yes, I agree with that. The mindset has to literally be reconstructed, and that takes way more than 3 months. Danielle, I salute you because abso-freaking-lutely, okay? He has to want to change and receive specific help that will go to the core of years of why he is violent and angry. Exactly. Exactly. My kid's father just did 25 and been home now going on 6 years. When I say he has changed now, he's out being a great disciple. This is what I'm saying. It takes time for people to change. It takes time for people to change. And I just feel like the charges that the government went after when they went for this RICO, that's what makes me say they dropped the ball. You did not charge him. You tried to go for distribution. How about you went for drug trafficking? Because they were trafficked across state lines and out the country. They brought the drugs there. You know what I'm saying? You didn't go for the firearms. You didn't go for the blackmail of an extortion of Cassie's mom. The things that they went after were not a lot, which tells me that they could spin the block with some of this stuff because he wasn't charged. That wasn't used as a charge. So that could be an ace in a hole to come back out later on if they decide to go after him again. Just a little bit of a rabbit hole that I jumped down with myself with trying to figure out why you didn't go for that. Why didn't you go for dealing in obscene matters? You told us about him filling up pools with Astroglide and baby oil and having Cassie step into it with high heels and lingerie to have sex with these sex workers. The urination and all of that other stuff that was going on. Why wasn't that? I mean, we were all appalled with the things that we heard. So that's why I say what I say about them dropping the ball. But now I'm listening to what they're saying, and back to what we're on right now with why the government is going after 11 years. They're talking about how he basically, and this is what they're putting out there. This is not my personal opinion, but this is what I'm picking up from what they're putting down, that he's basically manipulating the therapists by not telling them the full story, only giving them half-cocked versions of it, is manipulating the therapist to try to get an outcome from them that would be appeasing and favorable for you when it comes down to your sentencing. And this is what they're talking about. But I still would like to know how they even came to that conclusion in the notes. Maybe they'll tell us as they go along. I'll read a couple more comments and then I'm back to it. All right. So Michelle Gray says he needs help mentally and for his addiction issues, but he has to be open to admitting his wrong joints and what he did and take an accountability for it. That's the only way change will happen. And I agree with you. If you go back, you know that I have been advocating that he needs substance abuse, anger management, and intensive therapy. That's been my thing for all of this. If you're going to sentence him to that stuff as well. Make that a part of a requirement for his release. You understand what I'm saying? Like, be part of the solution and not part of the problem. Okay, last statement before we jump back into a comment. Diddy does need therapy. He has the money to pay for top psychological treatment. Make that mandatory sentencing, but do it out of the prison system. I don't see that happening. Honestly, I don't see that happening. But I do see what you're saying, because we do agree to a degree on what we're talking about here. All right, so let's get back into it. All right. The defendant attempts to blame his violent conduct on his history of substance abuse is also misguided. Defendant told Dr. Kruger and Kaplan that blank and the blank and the blank, blank, blank. Yet several of the defendant's most violent acts did not appear to have occurred under the influence of any drugs. Then it says Flores testified that the defendant did not appear drunk or high at the time of the intercontinental assault. So Flores was the security guard that responded to the call that Cassie made at the Intercontinental Hotel. And he did say that he didn't appear drunk or high at the time. Okay, so noting that the defendant took champagne and tequila, but had not otherwise taken narcotics prior to his assault of Jane in 2024. So they're saying those two instances are showing that it's not just when he's on substances that he's abusive, he's just abusive and violent by nature. One of the things that people testified to is that he has a very quick temper, and we've heard that. Anyway, indeed, while Dr. Kruger points out the defendant's blank as a potential cause of his violence, noting that blank, these medications, in reality, it was the defendant who sought out excessive amounts of these prescription drugs, including by having doctors prescribe medications in the names of his employees when he exceeded the regular dose. Now, pause right there, because that's a charge right there that he could have gotten federally, because you're getting prescriptions written in your employees' names and filling them so that you can continue to take prescription drugs. On this record, the court should reject any conclusions drawn from these assessments regarding the defendant's proclivity for sexual abuse or violence. Further, the defendant's false statements and to his evaluating doctors about his criminal conduct and personal history emphasize the need for the sentence imposed to account for specific deterrence. Mitigating reports. You did not have to speak with a psychologist, but in my view, your efforts to explain away your conduct and some things were just demonstratively false tells me that you are not deterred, that you will not be deterred. Okay, this sentence must act as the deterrent. Ultimately, the best predictor of future performance is past behavior. And the defendant has shown time and again his inability to cease his abusive behavior, even in the face of potential criminal, professional, and financial penalties. Okay. Now they go on to the defendant's personal circumstances do not warrant a lenient sentencing. Now, pause there for a second as well, because when it comes down to his personal circumstances. Now, there were 65 letters that I saw I didn't read all of them, I'm not going to lie to you, that were written by people in favor of Diddy. Some of those were from Janice Combs, Justin, Quincy, and the list goes on, like the family members, okay, close friends. My thing with all of this is 65 people wrote letters in favor of Diddy, right? But 65 people did not show up to court to support him. Let that sink in. So all of these powerful CEOs and moguls, even Karisha, please, did not show up to court. Neither did Saucy Santana. G-Dep and Kanye showed up to court. That's it. Nobody else. But now you've got 65 people who, to me, I feel like they're just trying to kiss the ring, excluding his family. They're just trying to kiss the ring because they feel like he may come home. And I said this in my Instagram lives. If you're not following me on Instagram, make sure you are following me at That Girl Henny Reviews on IG. Now, I said on my IG live, Karisha, please. That's a good man, Savannah. Karisha, please. Please. Hirsch. We do not want to hear from you, Karisha. You yourself backed away from Diddy because his trial was not good. Remember when she sat down with Saucy, she said she had to leave him because it's what was best for her and her family. Meaning, I can't go down with Big Daddy's sinking ship. Now that he's getting ready to come home, you want to get on mics and you want to rap and do diss tracks and all of that. Girl, if you don't go sat your ass down somewhere, because I know she's still dealing with him. She's still talking to him. I know she is. That was just said for the public. Child, please. Karisha, please. Sit your ass down somewhere. You ain't even show up to the damn courthouse as support. Not 1 day, not 2 days, not a half a day. Sit down. That's what I'm saying. Like, where was y'all? If I was Diddy, I wouldn't fuck with none of y'all. And I'm being honest. Because where was y'all when I was all the way down to the ground? It would have looked better in court if I had more people sitting there on my side of the courtroom in support of me. The judge would have seen that. The hell? They had him coming in there looking like the black version of Mr. Rogers every day. All he had to do was sit down and start singing "It's a Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood" and change his damn shoes. And we would have had it. Had his family coming in there listening to all of that stuff that was going on. I still feel for those girls sitting there listening to all of that stuff that was going on and listening to the testimony that was going on with their father. But it was visually appealing to have the family sitting there in court every single day. Mama Combs, I sat and talked to her. Yes, I'm calling her Mama Combs because that's Janice. That's her. Like, not my mama, his mama. Janice was sitting up there in court. I spoke to her and she told me there was times that she came to the courthouse straight from the plane. She was flying in and going from JFK to 500 Pearl Street so that she could be there in support of him. And she 85 years old. Karisha, the door, the chair, and the door. Bye. Anyway, let's read this last part, okay? And then after that, we're going to stay on Twitch. We're going to end this portion of program for Kick, Rumble, Facebook, and YouTube, and we're going to be over there on the Twitch. Can one of the mods start dropping the Twitch link, please, so that people can click the Twitch link before we they can click it when we get ready to end this portion of programming over here? Because we not staying over here. We going over there on a Twitcher and we going to talk about all the other stuff that I wanted to talk about that we ain't talk about over here. And then I'll just clip it up and give y'all videos later. Anyway, so the defendant's personal circumstances do not warrant a lenient sentence. Finally, the defendant asked the court to consider his family circumstances and community contributions in imposing sentence. The court can and should consider these facts under, Section 3553A factors. However, the defendant must also be held account for the fact that he used the same wealth and power to enable his crimes, to fly escorts on hundreds of occasions, to keep Ventura and Jane under the influence of narcotics for days at a time, and to leverage his resources to threaten his victims. Further, although many defendants come before sentencing court with compelling mitigating factors contextualizing why they turned to crime, the defendant has enjoyed a remarkable life of privilege. He disclaims a history of abuse or neglect as a child and has had the full support of family throughout his life. Yet, despite this, the defendant nevertheless engaged in abusive conduct for over a decade. Hold on, let me come over here to the YouTube channel really quickly so that I could pin the Twitch link to the top of the screen. So when I say that we are heading over to Twitch, you guys can then go ahead and just click the link and go over, make sure you that you sub up, okay? Follow and sub up. Hold on, let me open the chat. All right, here we go. Thank you, Uniquely. All right, so the Twitch link is pinned at the top. There you go. Teamwork definitely makes the dream work, and I can't do this without everyone that helps me. All right. Let's get back over here and let's get back into what we were reading. So basically, they're saying, yes, you should consider what's being written down by the family and consider what's being written down by everyone else. Consider that. However, don't forget that he still has the power and privilege, and the same power and privilege and prestige that he's had, and connections and community and all of that. It still doesn't negate away from the fact that while he had all of these things, he didn't have a troubled past. In fact, this behavior was going on while he had a remarkably privileged life. Okay. The defendant also urges the court to impose a lenient sentence due to the collateral consequences on his business empire and professional legacy that has resulted from his criminal case. The court should reject any argument that these collateral harms to the defendant warrant a lenient sentence. Now, faced with the repercussions of his actions, the defendant casts himself as the victim. He is not the victim. The court should focus on the very real effects that the defendant's conduct has had on the lives of the actual victims, his victims, and significant sentence is especially warranted here, where the defendant does not appear to appreciate the harm inflicted on these individuals or the seriousness of his conduct. Now, before anybody gets to saying, well, but he did apologize to Cassie. He did apologize after denying that it even happened. Let's keep it a buck and a bean. He denied that it happened. And then after the video came out, that's when he decided to say, you know what? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. And during and this is what I was saying to people when people were like, oh, well, the defense said this and the defense did that and the defense is doing this. And I'm like, they're doing too much. This does not look good, because he will not just sit down. He won't sit down. Shout out to everybody who's already jumped over on the Twitch. It did not look good. Okay. It did not look good. So based in part on need for personal deterrence, because while the defendant has accepted the difficult situation that he has put himself in and his family in, he has not fully accepted the harm that he did to the female victims here. There's no remorse. Remember I said that? I said, he's so busy trying to get out, he ain't showing no remorse. I should buy a damn ticket and go up there to New York on Friday, huh? Oh, boy. I should go. Y'all want your girl to go to Florida, to go up there and cover the trial for New York. Y'all gonna have to send me a cash. I kid. I joke. There'll be people up there. I know. I should have gone up there. I just didn't feel like it. But this is gonna be interesting to see. The sad part is I don't really see the people that are gonna go. I gotta find the people that are gonna tell it like it is, and not tell it from just whatever. Anyway. Now, it says, in addition to a sentence of at least 135 months imprisonment, the government respectfully requests the court to impose a fine of $500,000. The maximum fine allowed is that $500,000? That's $500,000. They asking him for $500,000. That's the maximum fine allowed under the statute, setting $250,000 as a maximum fine for each felony. So they're charging him $250,000 per felony. A district court must consider the factors set forth in sections 3553A, 3571, and 3572, as well as the guidelines, factors, and range. See United States, the guidelines provide that the district court shall impose a fine in all cases except where the defendant establishes that he is unable to pay and is not likely to become able to pay any fines. So basically they're saying, nah, he gonna pay these fines. He got the money, so he gonna pay these fines. All right. Here, a significant fine is needed to deter the defendant from further criminal conduct and to reflect a seriousness of the defendant's offenses. Such a fine is also needed to provide just punishment. A fine particularly fitting here since the defendant's access to wealth enables his crimes. It was used to transport and pay for escorts, obtain narcotics, and pay for his vast staff to serve his every need. Given the defendant's substantial means, a hefty fine is certainly warranted in this case. All right. The parties continue to discuss forfeiture and expect to present the court with a consent preliminary order for forfeiture in advance of sentencing. Finally, Ventura is not seeking restitution in this case at this time. The government understands that Jane is not seeking restitution. And so, therefore, they have concluded, for the foregoing reasons, the government respectfully submits the sentence of 135-month imprisonment is appropriate. So, and this is signed Trump's man, Jay Clayton. Now, while we didn't read the whole 165 page document, I will read it on a podcast for you guys, so that you guys can have the audio and listen to it if you really want to hear it in its entirety. That won't happen today, though, but I will get it out for you guys. Now, I want to go into some of these letters that were written. So here we have Cassie's letter, which was filed on the 30th, which is today. Okay. This is a 4-page letter. She wrote him a 4-page letter. And so we're going to get into these letters. Now, if you would like to continue to watch on. Oh, I did not give the Facebook the link. So if you are on Facebook, we are on Twitch. You can find me on Twitch at official that girl Henny. I'm going to say thank you for watching from YouTube, Rumble, Kick, and Facebook. But this is going to conclude for YouTube. And I'm going to close it off with this. While I do see where the government is going by saying that, hey, he's committed all of these crimes, he shows no remorse, there is evidence of this being a pattern that he has continued to display over decades. And while there is a history of violence, a history of narcotics use, he has also manipulated his therapists. So therefore, their diagnoses are manipulated based off of what he has told them. And we just don't feel that he is not a danger or a threat to society. A lot of you may not agree with me, but I do feel like 11 years and a quarter is a bit much. But I also understand where they're coming from when it comes down to the people who have, according to the government, according to testimony, suffered at the hands of Diddy's power and privilege that he has had for decades, and how for decades he has gone unpunished. He has gone without anyone calling the po-po-ho or anybody. Okay. And now they're saying, all right, well, the jury didn't charge him with the RICO or the SMEX trafficking, and they got him for the Mann Act. all of this information, it does tie in with these cases because it's still a preponderance of violence. And I did tell you guys it was going to be a preponderance of violence that was going to weigh in. And I did say he wasn't looking remorseful and that it didn't look good on his behalf. But I don't think that the judge is going to actually give him this 11 years and a quarter. I see that he may get about 5 years, if anything, max, maybe 3. I don't really see him getting 11. If he gets that 11, I would be completely shocked. But in the meantime, in between time, we are on Twitch with it. Thank you for tapping in and tuning in with us. I'm going to say see you